In addition to game designers and programmers, the team has some of the most talented artists in the industry. These folks create new heroes, monsters, environments, and gear. They bring style and character to the worlds that we play in. How do they do that? Let's go find out.
So it seems to me like the point of doing a behind-the-scenes look at what happens on the art or in the making of a game like WoW, you don't want to just hear about the typical stuff that you could read about online. And this seems like a good opportunity to see what it actually is like creating the game as opposed to what we may project all the time. I'd like to use this opportunity to kind of give you that look and talk a little bit about some of the mishaps and some of the cool parts of making the game and ultimately how we came up with what we wanted to do for Cataclysm.
Probably the biggest thing we've learned are things that the general players probably won't even notice. It's basically how we structure our team and how we can make a zone just more efficiently and more quickly.
We have developed a very sophisticated art style. I would say that the original World of Warcraft was kind of the foundation for us to build upon with the next two ensuing expansions. We really want to try and emphasize the storyline throughout the whole game. I think it helps the player feel connected and feel like they know what's going on, with this expansion.
One thing that was really important to us was to maintain a sense of familiarity in the zones that we were reworking so that people didn't travel into Ashara and see all the new goblin stuff, but also go, what the hell happened to the zone? It doesn't look like anything I remember it being. I think we would have failed if we got to the point where people were disappointed in how much we changed things. A certain amount of that is probably inevitable, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're keeping things exciting and new, and this was an awesome opportunity to do that. So we centralized the whole process around the Cataclysm. But then you also have some pretty cool things like the Goblin and Worgen that give you an excuse to bring new architecture styles in, new storylines, and sort of help to fold those people into the Horde and the Alliance in ways that endear them to players. That might be one of the hardest things, as a side note, about a new race is, yeah, we know Worgen, we know goblins, but what makes them familiar to us? And as players, when you see a Worgen walking through Stormwind, or you see a goblin walking through Orgrimmar or anywhere, what's going to make you feel like, yeah, those guys are really part of my group. They're part of the Horde, they're part of the Alliance. Using that was a cool method of saying, okay, well, let's not just show new goblin architecture in Kazan or in the new starting areas. Let's actually talk about how we can do the things that we build for those areas and pull it into the old world so that it's still Ashara, but now it's Ashara with goblin influence.
The designers thought, yeah, if we're going to make this, it's a significant investment. So let's weave some story in here. Like with lots of our starting zones, you start as a player in a village in the countryside somewhere, and then move to a main city. But we thought, well, no, let's throw the player in at the deep end. Let's chuck them into the city. Actually, let's make the city in a war zone, really, between the infected Worgen and the citizens that still remain human. And let's weave our saga, the first 4 or 5 levels, around this, make it really exciting for the players.
Used to be years ago when you make video games, a video game artist would make everything to do with the game. Not so on a game like World of Warcraft.
There's a great relationship between concept art and design. It's a really, really smooth thing. I think both departments feed off each other. When design first tackle a zone, they do Illustrator maps, which are just, you get sheets of paper that have just got geometric shapes flattened, dotted about on them, just to show you location, scale, key points of interest and events. I made the suggestion, well, these are fine for fundamental design documents, but would it be useful for you guys to have something a bit more arty to work from? Because the designers then take those Illustrator maps and start building the world out in 3D and kind of doing a sort of a fake isometric world. So I draw the little mountains in. It looks like really, really old maps from sort of 400 or 500 years ago. So you get little scribbly drawings for buildings, and here's a couple of spiky trees to suggest a forest, and you get a feel for the topography, for the geography, how the zone fills out. So I did a few of those initially for Gilneas and gave them back to the designers. They went, "These are fantastic! Why haven't we been doing these all along?"
Our main goal as the dungeon team is to be the support for the design. Take what they give us and interpret it into an art asset, which is challenging, but it can be a lot of fun as well. And there's a lot of going back and forth between the design and art.
In terms of looking at the whole art and design of the project, there were a few bits and pieces, few races, few baddies that we did that I really, really liked. I think probably Twilight's Hammer ended up being, for me, the most significant. They are the minions of Deathwing.
Being that he's the major villain for this expansion, obviously we wanted to make sure that we tied him into a lot of the things that we were doing and made sure that it was always building towards when you would eventually, or if you would eventually meet up with him. Most visual impact on what we were doing artistically would be the Cataclysm and what happened when he came into the world. When we approached re-envisioning the old world, it wasn't so much of a how do we re-envision it as much as it was how do we take what's there and make sure that we stay true to what people have come to love, know and love, but also have probably gotten a little sick of looking at as they grind new characters up 0 to 60. If we didn't have the tool of the Cataclysm to work with, I think it would have been a very difficult thing to do. The Cataclysm helped out a lot just in the sense of, well, what are we going to do to change the Barrens? Let's put a big crack in the middle of it and change it into northern and southern, and that gives you like a central theme. We can keep what's there, but it gives you this whole new area to explore and a new central sort of like exciting element to the zone.
The old world simply was not designed to be flyable and to go to places you normally wouldn't go if you were just on the ground.
So we had to go in and figure out how the roofs are going to match together. And ironically, I found out later that when they were building the original game, it did have roofs, and then they deleted them.
Most of the game was meant to be seen from a certain point of view. In Vashj'ir in particular, it was very important for the exterior level designers to be kind of a surprise for players, to be something they had never seen before. So we wanted them to have a great first-time experience. So as you come out of the first little cave, and we wanted that to be very striking and very stunning the first time the players saw this zone, they knew it was going to be something special, something different, definitely something they've never seen before in World of Warcraft.
As far as dungeons go, the first one that we started working on was for Vashj'ir. It's Abyssal Maw. It truly reached beyond my expectations as far as the colors and the design. Our programmers really stepped up to the plate and gave us a lot of new shaders and things like that that has enhanced our textures and enhanced the quality of our dungeons. As you go through it, we wanted it to feel very immersive, no pun intended. It is an underwater dungeon, but we really wanted you to feel like you're underwater and, there's plant life and there's movement going on, and it's not just kind of stagnant. We wanted that feeling of even just the water and, that subtle movement coming across there. We are also getting some caustics so that we get that underwater reflection.
So we've seen elementals for a long time in the game, and they are very cool, but I know that I personally am sick of seeing the same elementals. I know there are a lot of people that feel the same way. So when we're talking about an expansion where the elemental planes are broken and elementals are pouring forth into Azeroth, clearly we're going to talk about what can we do with the elementals to sort of bring them up to a new bar, or at least give people new content to look at, new creatures to play around with. We went through a series of concepting, gave it to one person to concept, and then we took it back away and had 5 people concept it. And throughout that process, we started working with the Twilight's Hammer kit, started talking about how they build their buildings, summon Elementium, how everything around them is keyed into that Elementium vibe, and it kind of clicked. We use that with the elementals. Like, these guys are subjugating the elementals, they're part of their army. How would the Twilight's Hammer guys put an elemental under their control? The solution that Mark Gibbons came up with, which was really cool, was what if they caged them, made a literal cage that was somewhat like a rib cage or an actual physical structure that would summon around these elementals and control them. All the elementals have a similar theme. They all have the same cage that's holding them. And then obviously there are rock and fire and water guys, but the really neat thing was how do we use that cage and come up with interesting silhouettes, use what we already have with the existing elementals and kind of make it familiar but new. And I think we came up with a pretty cool solution for that.
People ask an awful lot about where you get your ideas from, where does inspiration come from? And for a long time I struggled to answer that because what I've realized now is it's not a conscious process. It's the subconscious brain that percolates ideas. And when you sit down with a piece of paper, if you're ready to draw stuff, it's because your subconscious has told your conscious what to do. So the worst thing for me is to sit down with a blank piece of paper and have no idea what I'm going to draw. The subconscious, it's like a muscle you have to exercise, and you have to feed it.
It's interesting being somebody who's not necessarily involved with the day-to-day creation process on a game like this. I mean, I am, but I'm not the person there that's building the models in every case, although I do go in and mess things up from time to time and people have to clean up after me. But what's really cool for me is to see a team of talented artists like we have, and really they're the most talented artists that I've ever worked with in my entire life, and see what they're able to not only do on their own on an individual basis, but also what they're capable of when they come together as a team, and see the character guys working on the Tol'vir, and then see the dungeon guys working on the Uldum dungeon, and environment guys working on Uldum. And you would think that I would be the one that's sort of bringing them all together and making sure they're communicating. It's actually just this really crazy process of, hey, look at what I made, and that keys this other person. They go, wow, that's so cool. We could totally base a building off of that, or that design on that character is really awesome. We're going to use that as a centerpiece for our dungeon. There's no human being who could ever set out and have the picture of what we create in their heads. It takes those people bringing their ideas together to come up with that ultimate project. And for me, that's inspiring.